Welcome to the Wicked Podcast, where we read the business books you don't have the time for. I'm Marcus Kish.
And I'm Troy Norcross.
And we are your co-hosts for the Wicked Podcast.
So, Marcus, you've seemed very, very energized all evening this evening. What's going on? Is it the pottery or is it something else that got you so energized?
Yeah, it's probably pottery. Let's keep it PC here. It's the pottery.
Okay.
I just finishing a project at the moment. I'm looking at the next year because we're now in November and it's nearly December, and there's a lot of excitement on my side, at least, for next year. There's a lot of people I'm talking to, so I'm very happy. However, we're here tonight on the podcast, and I'm always excited to talking to you, my friend.
And who are we talking to together? Who's on the show tonight?
So today we're talking to Lucy McCarraher and her book, Book Builder. I mean, she wrote 13, but she owns a publishing company, and the Book Builder is the very interesting one about being very detailed about if you want to write a book that elevates your business, gets your story out there, your mission, vision, something. That's the one we're talking about tonight, and it was lovely talking to her. She's also the founder of the UK Business Book Awards. Super interesting.
Right.
And just like, our friend Alison. So we're not talking to two people on that. And but however, now that I'm rambling on, what were your takeaways?
Yes, and you're very, very accomplished at your rambling. I think you could put that on your kind of skills in your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, right. Longest Guinness record rambling.
Right. So I liked her pain to promise, kind of nice, succinct. That's really kind of what you're trying to do is find a reader, identify or let them identify with a particular pain, and then promise them that you can bring them through to a solution and do that with a specific process that's your process. The pain to promise via process was really great. The other one was, I was curious because when I do teaching, it forces me to create all of my thoughts and then organize all of my thoughts and structure all of my thoughts. And I actually find out I come out on the other side knowing more than before I was doing the teaching. And she confirmed that, yeah, a lot of authors, entrepreneurs or others, have all these great ideas, but they don't organize them. And it forces them to actually become better entrepreneurs, better in their business, because then they understand their stuff better. What were your takeaways?
Yeah, I think she quite reflected Alison's similar approach to, like, when you write, you focus, whatever. What happened for me was, like, my design thinking part of the brain flared up because of exactly that same structure. So I'm nearly replicating what you said, but essentially saying, look, know who your target audience is, know what the problem is, and then give them a promise or a solution that actually is a takeaway. And the best books are really that. So, and we mentioned a couple of them, Kath Bishop, Alvin Turner, David Marquet. There's a couple of amazing books that just really get down to the level of often your own story. If not that, it's a good structure about, I'll tell you what to do. Here's the thing you can literally take away. And here's the thing and how it happened. And often the personal stories, how it happened, also give you a really good idea, like how this happens in reality. I think, so for me, therefore, the best books are like that. And my first book wasn't quite like that, but I hope my next will be. It's like, here's reality. Here's reality. Here's the real problem. Here's the thing. Because that means I was in there with my emotions, with my everything. And that's definitely a value, and that's worth spending a couple of hours with reading and getting through it. So I love that, having this clear structure that essentially really easily translate to a proper value for a book that everyone can enjoy. Great recipe for it. Loved it. So yeah, those were mine.
Well, here's to your next book, and here's to Let's Go Talk to Lucy.
Before the interview, a quick word from our very first sponsor, Zencaster. We use Zencaster for all our audio and video recording, and it's a very nifty tool that splits up all the channels for very easy editing. Zencaster is used by 10% of all active podcasts. You can get 40% off the first 3 months and unlimited audio and video recordings with our special coupon code wickedpodcast. I repeat, Wicked Podcast for 40% off. And now the interview. Hello everyone, today we're here with Lucy McCarraher. Hello Lucy, and thank you for being with us.
Hi, Troy and Marcus. Great to be with you.
So as usual, we start at the top. So please tell our listeners, and we know there's a couple of books you wrote, but we'll talk about one in particular. Tell us please who you are and why you wrote the book.
Okay, so I am the founder of Rethink Press. So I'm a publisher. Rethink Press is the UK's biggest hybrid publisher of business books. I'm also the founder of the Business Book Awards. I'm the author of 13 books in total. And
Wow.
I'm a book mentor. So I've probably taken 1,000 plus entrepreneurs through the process of writing their book. And I run the Book Builder program for Rethink Press, where we go through. It's about writing your book in 90 days. So
So you
that's
used the word hybrid press. Tell me a bit more about hybrid press.
okay. So I'm sure you know there are sort of three routes to publishing at the moment, and the first one is traditional publishing, and that's to do with the publisher's business model. So I call a traditional publisher a Penguin, a Wiley, a Macmillan, where the publisher invests in the book, pays for the production of the book, and then makes their money from sales. And that's really the only way they get their return on their investment is through sales of the books. So traditional publishers look for authors who sell books. Then at the other end of the scale, there is self-publishing, DIY self-publishing, where the author in effect becomes a micro publisher, pays the professionals who you need. I mean, self-publishing, I think, is a misnomer because you can't self-publish a decent
Yeah.
book on your own. You have to have professionals like editors, cover designers, typesetters, and all that. So you can do that yourself. You can round up professionals to do that with you, project manage the whole thing, learn how to work out Amazon, get your book converted to Kindle and record an audio book and all those sorts of things. And that's DIY self-publishing. So what is now called hybrid publishing sits in the middle of those two. So a hybrid publisher, like Rethink Press, does everything that a traditional publisher would do. So takes the whole project of the book and works with the author to create their book and then publishes it under their name and under their ISBN and troubleshoots later. But the author pays up front. The publisher doesn't invest in the book themselves. The author invests in the book, and then they have control over it. And they also probably get a bigger royalty. They certainly do with Rethink Press. And it's not about selling loads of books. It's more about writing and publishing a book that you can then use to build your business. So that publishing model works better for authors who are not going to sell loads of books at retail, because so they wouldn't get a traditional publishing contract, but they are still able to publish a really high quality book.
So that's a thing I want to also pick up before we go into dive a bit deeper into a lot of amazing details of the book itself. So you're saying, transforming your business, and obviously there's a lot of people exactly writing books for that particular purpose. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more of what that means, please?
So, I mean, the point of writing a book at a certain stage in your business is, I mean, what the authors that we work with are people who have built successful businesses. They're not people who are starting out usually, although occasionally we get the odd unicorn who decides to base their business on their book, and the ideas in their book. But most people that we work with are entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants. They have a business. They have 6 or 7 figure turnover businesses, but they know that they're kind of hitting a ceiling and they want to transform their business into the next level. And we work with them to create a book that actually does that. So it's a book that is really aimed at their ideal clients, their market, to bring them authority and expertise. But it probably isn't going to sell loads of copies. But if they mainly give away as well as selling, their books, and if they just get into the right hands, it has an absolutely transformational effect on their business.
Yeah, and I've been hearing for quite a long time that a lot of people are writing books as a form of a calling card, and so kind of giving it away as a better than a calling card because it contains more than your contact details. It contains your ideas.
Exactly, and that is exactly the sort of book that I mentor, and we publish books that do exactly that. And I mean, I don't like the idea that, sort of book as calling card kind of devalues the book. So, you're just writing something that's a thinly disguised marketing brochure. It's not about that. The whole point of the book that is different to a business card, a marketing brochure, a sales pitch, is that it is not overtly selling. It's giving people huge value because it is full of ideas, and often it's about the way that the author takes clients through a process to get from pain to promise, if you like. So when people are looking for your book, they are experiencing a certain kind of pain, a problem, a question they need answered. And the book actually takes them through a process that the author has possibly kind of commodified, turned into a model, made easy to do, and it enables them to reach that promise that the book is offering. But the ideal thing is that some people will read the book and get huge value just from reading it, go away and apply it themselves. But for other people, who we would call the ideal client, they will read that book and realize that actually what they need is not just the information there, but the implementation that author can bring them by working with them one to one.
Yeah, and that's just one of the probably best things about. I feel after reading, obviously, we read quite a couple of books on this podcast alone, and before, as much as you have. So some of the best books are really about. They feel quite authentic about basically people saying, "Look, this is my story, or this is what I've learned," and generally, here's a potential interesting thought or authentic thought. And so maybe my question here is that, so this is all great, and it's great to have a lot of good books out there. I think one of the reasons also why after I bought my own book and with Troy started this podcast is to figure out this gap between, well, there are a lot of books out there. Some are really great. Some sell a bit more than others. But the fact is, there's a lot of amazing knowledge out there and value, as you said, for people to read the books. So who is then most likely to read the books? How easy is it to then find the CEOs or something likely with business books to go and read them? So how does it work? Does it not work? What needs to be done about it? Because it feels, and we work a lot in change and transformation, that there's thousands of books out there with great ideas, and sometimes we doubt how many CEOs are actually reading it.
Yeah, no, I guess that's true. I think it depends on who the ideal client you are talking to is. Sometimes it's a CEO, and in that case, you would expect that the author has already built up that connection with that area of the market and will get that book to the CEO. And then, their ideal result would be that the CEO comes back to them and says, "Look, help me to do this, help me to implement these ideas." Whether they've read the whole book or not is another matter. I
Yeah.
suppose there is a difference in the kind of book that a traditional publisher would commission, and that might be more of an ideas book. It might be less about implementation and how to make things happen, and more about ideas, experience. Um, uh, so they because they're looking to sell the book. I mean, to sell more books. So they're looking for something that's eye catching and that sort of taps into the zeitgeist of the time. While the books that we publish tend to have obviously a smaller market, they're niche, they're aimed at a particular, sometimes a really small segment of the market.
Mm.
And so the ideas might not be so extraordinary, not be so new, but they simply won't have been addressed in that particular client base. Does that
I
make
think
sense?
it does make sense. That particular client base. Marcus is tired of hearing me tell the story about you can give me a book that tells me exactly how to play the piano. You can teach me to read music. And at the end, I can indeed play notes on a page, but someone else has the same piano and the same music and plays beautiful music. And it's that difference of the art and the application and knowing when you need someone to actually play the music. So I completely get this. Sometimes I get it, I can apply it, and sometimes I get it and I think, I could really use some help to actually do this. But
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we call the ideal reader, the ideal client will, for the authors that we work with, will be the ones who come back and say, yeah, I totally get what you're talking about, but you need to help me with this. I can't do this on my own. So for instance, with my Book Builder, I love people to read it. I hope many people will go away and write their own book. But equally, I would love some of them to come back and say, actually, I want to work with you on the Book Builder program. Please take me through this process and give me your personal support to get it done.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of really, really good stuff in terms of structuring and getting about things, and so I'm actually more commenting now than actually having the next question. But I think it's just impressive to see that how well your book is structured, and then I'm trying to relate it back to some of the titles that are very much in my head, which are like David Marquet's Turn the Ship Around, Cass Bishop's The Long Win, and Alvin Turner's Be Less Zombie. And they're all books that are out there that have done really, really well or are very, very interesting for particular reasons. Some for the evidence of reality of how to do something and implement something, others to really challenge known understandings, and others just generally great at getting things like innovation really out there and connecting. So all of those have a big variety of things they accomplish. So my question is probably, you know, you say at some point, solve a problem that exists. Um, can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because you have a couple of components that that a book should have to be clear about it in order to be successful. Could you elaborate on that, please, a little bit
Yeah,
more?
well, I think if you're writing a book that is going to do this kind of work for your business to move it to the next level, you need to. I mean, we talk about the three P's of position. So the first thing you need to do is be absolutely clear who you're writing it for. So it is your ideal client, your ideal reader, I mean, I always say, sort of think of an avatar. I mean, this wouldn't work so well for the broad brush, big ideas book. But for the book that you are writing to resonate with your market, however niche that is, you really need to identify the person that you're writing for and literally speak to them as you write the book. I think people make the mistake of thinking that when they're writing a book, they need to speak to everybody in the world, and it's sort of like, you out there I'm talking to. But actually, they forget that every single person reading your book is one person listening to your voice. It's a one-to-one experience. So if you are going to use this book to build your business, you want to be very one-to-one with the person you most want to read it and come back to you. So that's the first thing you have to get clear on. And then the two other P's are, I mean, I've sort of mentioned them already, are pain, and it's understanding why that person would be looking for your book right now. And indeed, not just your book, but ideally your services, your business, whatever it offers, and being very clear about, I mean, of course, every client, every reader is going to have individual problems and things they want solved, questions they want answered. But overall, your book needs to be clear that there is one place where they are coming from when they're picking up your book, when they're Googling to find something to solve their problem. And you need to be very clear what that is. And then you equally need to be very clear about what you're offering them, what, when they've read your book, they will be able to do, they will know, they will have experienced, how they will feel when they've read it, and where it takes them. So it's that sort of triangle of position, the three P's of position, that makes a book clear and really appeals to the right people. I'm not sure if I've answered your question because I've now forgotten what it was, but
Um, I liked the one thing you said just there at the end, how the reader will feel after they've read your book. Um, I'm I've known it for quite a long time, but I've never had it more obvious than in the last 6, 7 years that emotion drives people so much more than clear, rational thought. A book that's purely factual is unlikely to make much progress.
yeah,
I got a
absolutely.
I've got a different direction on the question, though. I've had the joy of being a teacher at many times in my life, whether I'm teaching in a marketing context or whether I'm teaching actually in a course, in a classroom context. And there's no better way than to get my ideas clarified than to try to teach. Do you find that some of your authors go through that same journey?
Oh, absolutely. It is I mean, I think this is the other thing about how a book can transform, well, your business, but your life even. Because when you go through, I mean, I'm very hot on planning and structure and making sure that everything is underpinned by a really good structure of a book, because I think that makes for the most enjoyable. It shouldn't be noticeable, but for the reader, that's the most enjoyable experience. But yes, I mean, I find that so many authors I work with, just we start with a really intense planning process. So they unpack everything that they need to write about, put it in order, different kinds of text, different kinds of content, and make that, have an absolutely kind of detailed blueprint for their book before they start writing. And that in itself makes them go, oh my God, I can, this is what my business does. This is how I do it. I could do it better. I could change this. I could. So that's kind of transformative in itself. And then when you go through the writing process of unpacking 30 to 40,000 words about what you do and what you think and your own story, and you have your case studies in there, then it really kind of, it gives people incredible confidence, because then you have an archive of content that's sort of lodged in your head, in your mind, once you've written it down. So you're never then at a loss. You've got repurposable material for courses and for speaking gigs, and if you're ever asked a question, it's all there. So yes, it is about what you're doing when you're writing the book, is teaching, is unpacking your knowledge and your process often, and clarifying it. And so you are teaching people to go through it yourself, and it brings huge clarity to the authors, and really surprises them that they know as much as they know, and do what they do in the way that they do it. It's fascinating to watch it happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to go through that kind of to the process. And like, I think, our joint friend Alison Jones, she talks a lot about writing books and the focus it brings to you. And I was just and no one saw this. You only saw this. I was just speeding off the video because I tried to find this massive tome of a book that's on my reading pile, which is I think something around a book about mega projects, and it's like thicker than the Bible. And you talk a lot about having a particular amount of words, like 30,000, between 30 and 40 or something. So my book's a little bit more than that, and we obviously read now over 70 books a week over the last year and a half. And
Not 70 a week, Marcus. Not 70 a week. Don't do that
sorry,
to me.
one a week for 70 weeks. There you go. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. But the whole thing where actually, when you start reading a lot of books, you get a really good feel for the size of a book, how concise it is to bring something across. What's your experience on? There is probably a particular format and size of what it takes to bring across a particular notion or an idea in a particular way. Can you talk a bit about that? Because you're actually quite detailed on the particular structure of how you should go about it, and what a good structure looks like, and what a good way of conveying a certain thing looks like in your book. Can you elaborate on
Yeah,
that,
well, I mean,
please?
yes, I mean, I would say that 30 to 40,000, and I do say probably many times that 30 to 40,000 words is an ideal length for this kind of book, because it is probably, to go back to your earlier point, it is just about as much as a CEO or, somebody in business is going to want to read. And if you, I mean, of course, a book can be longer, and, you might have much more complex thoughts and ideas in it than a 30 to 40,000 word book can contain. But actually, if you're talking about a process and you're just introducing them to ideas, then, very probably they don't need to know more than that. And, you are going to give them the extra information when they come back to you for the implementation. But I think a clear structure, taking them through and I think creating a process and making your own IP through a book is also an important and a useful thing to do. So you'll have noticed that that in my book, well, I'm very keen on acronyms and little models like the 3 Ps of position, but I also have the writer process and the author model and things like that, which are all acronyms. But it makes it easy to remember. It makes things. It gives the reader clarity, and it is a piece of IP that people then will often go on to use in their business that they hadn't necessarily thought through before starting to write the book. So, I mean, I talk about breaking the book into potentially 3 parts. So, a beginning, a middle, and end. The classic structure, I think, is really helpful to the reader, and then consistency within that structure. So, have chapters of roughly the same number of words. Have little breakouts in each chapter. So you have solid content, factual content, plus you have some anecdotal material like, your own story. I always feel should kind of run like a bit of a golden thread through a tapestry, engaging people with you, and not being your own story, not being there to kind of boast about your success, but actually to be vulnerable, to show people that you have been through the problems that they've been through, and you're that, those steps ahead of them. So why you've learned how to do what you do and how you can help them. And then I think a really vital part of a business book of this kind is to have case studies, which are again little vignettes, little stories that tell people, that show readers what you have done, what you have achieved on the ground with actual clients. So even if you have to anonymize them, because obviously some people's business is going to be very it's not going to be appropriate to have people's names or businesses identified there, but still, it's sort of putting things into little short stories that people can visualize. People remember stories. You can give them loads and loads of facts, and they won't remember those very clearly necessarily, which is one of the reasons why I think kind of acronyms and little models are more memorable. But stories, that's what they'll remember. And if you can put 2 or 3 case studies in each book that will speak to a particular kind of client that you want to attract, what you want them to go is, that's me. I'm in that position. I can see what they've done. I need this kind of help. And as well as being, an enjoyable and engaging story, it also makes them think, yeah, I need to work with you. And that's, the point of the use of that sort of book. So it's running all those kind of aspects through the book in a clear and consistent structure that will kind of hold, the ideal is to hold the reader right through the book, not let them drop out because there's a boring bit or there's an overcomplicated bit, but to keep them on the right track, the right tone, the right author voice to speak to them, and to have all these different elements that will keep them going and reading and really engaged with what you're saying, and then remembering it afterwards. So that's my take on the structure and keeping things moving for the reader.
Well, if and when I ever wind up writing a book of my own, it's unlikely to have a golden thread going through it so much as kind of a river wandering all over the fields,
Ah,
occasionally
come
with
on.
washouts, with occasional waterfalls and lots of rapids. But it'll be an interesting ride as we go along.
Sounds
Um,
great. Yeah.
the next question is maybe something you haven't done. We deal with teams a lot. and Marcus has his own kind of methodology around team ups that he's currently building up. Have you ever worked with a team to collectively write a book?
Oh, that's interesting. Actually, I haven't worked with a team myself, but I have mentored teams writing books, and sometimes it works brilliantly because they all have their own areas of expertise, and they know exactly what they're writing. Other times, it's a bit like herding cats, and somebody is really good at getting the work done, and other people just never show up with what they're supposed to have written. I've co-authored a lot of books. In fact, sort of, yeah, most of my books are probably the majority of my books are co-authored with different authors. And I mean, what I tend to do is kind of take control and say, I'll be the overall, I'll put this together. I want this from you. I want, can you write this bit and tell me about this? And I get a bit kind of controlling about it. But I think in a way somebody has to be. And I think it's important also that when you're writing a multi-authored book, but it's all about, unless it's sort of separate chapters by diverse authors,
Yeah.
which is a different thing. But if you are writing a book that is really one story or one idea, but you've got different people contributing to it, it's really important to have a single voice, and not jumping between different voices and different styles, and so I think it's important that either one of the authors or an editor kind of takes control at the end and gives it a consistency, and an overall style.
Oh, I totally recognize that because there's one or two books I really like because of exactly that. It's just a collection of small stories, and they're often like just shorter articles and responses from. Because I think I'm reading what is it? The one I'm referring to is like the 50 years anniversary of Future Shock by Alvin Toffler, and having sort of 20 people comment. But that's an easy one because everyone just comments with their little
Yeah.
stories. But then you get others where 3 or 4 people write it and try to get through a narrative, and it can be quite disjointed because you can tell there's different voices, tone of voices, and actually views on it. But beyond that, talking about a lot to put into one thing, as usual, we have more questions than time. And there we go again. This just flew by like nothing. So the last question, therefore, is somewhere along the line. I'm trying to hope I can phrase this right. So we just been through, what is it, 73 now episodes of this, which means a book a week or more. 73 books. I'm not going to tell anyone what's going to happen at episode number 100, but so we've been through this now, reading a lot of books. And considering how much people take on books and make sense of it, we're now maybe overloaded a bit on this. And surely you have more than we do because you run a publishing company. So are we crazy? Is it too much? How do you focus? How do you filter? There's a lot of good stuff out there.
Marcus, you're
Doesn't
supposed to
make
ask
sense.
one question, not
Oh, sorry.
four. Ask one question.
Okay, Troy, then rephrase it for me. Then you go. You go. You have a shot at it. There you
We've
go.
read 73 plus books, and it seems like a whole lot. And a book a week, that's been quite a lot because we try to actually read the books, not just kind of skim through them, but actually read them as well. And we've probably come up with 4 or 5 key ideas, and they just keep repeating. Is there any value beyond reading in the next 100 books? Are we really going to find 5 new great ideas based on your experience?
Oh gosh, that's a really interesting question. I think if you if you don't keep reading, you're in danger of not actually finding those those ideas that are going to really spring out and hit you, and might even change the world. I mean, I suppose really that's why I started the Business Book Awards, because in the last awards we had 275 entries, and I like to say that all of them are fantastic, but we had 12 winners, and those were the ones, and a real diversity of books, all sorts of different kinds of books. books, and from traditional publishers, hybrid publishers, self-publishers, and it's impossible to know in advance which ones are going to have those exceptional ideas, which ones the judges are going to choose and say these 12 books out of the nearly 300 are really, really worth reading. So I think, either go to the Business Book Awards website and pick the winners from there and read those.
Well, trust me, we've been skimming the shortlisted version for sure, and Taylor on it, whatever. We definitely use that as one of our funnels, and it's absolutely true. And as you said, I think there's so much diversity. And even if you look at, I mean, business is an amazingly big amount. It's a big area. Anything from HR to teams to leadership to there's 20 pieces there at least. It's definitely true, and I think it's really, really interesting to see that. I think the question then is really, as we said, we identified about 4 or 5 different themes, and if you do that, maybe another last question there therefore is, do you have sort of a bit of a structure to say, okay, I'm reading all these books, these are all the ideas, how do they build up? Because I know I'm taking notes here and there, and certain themes build up. And you go, okay, if you have this theme and you got a new book coming in, you judge it against your notes, and you go, well, okay, this is either same thing or different, or it needs a different angle or positioning, or it's got something in it that if you shape it a bit, it's going to be really, really, really great as a new kind of thought. Do you have something like that you sort of work through, a bit of a database or notes or something like that?
To be honest, I'm going to say no to that because the books that we publish are, as I've said, are can be really niche. I mean, one of our books was about about washing machines in the the pub and hotel industry. So I'm not sure whether that will qualify as being a really exciting new. It was a surprisingly interesting book. It had lots of things in it I did not know about washing machines and the value to the people who use them. However, I don't think it would fit into a matrix that I would have of, what are the big ideas. But I suppose all I can say is, we publish 60 or 70 books a year. I read, or at least, sort of skim read every single one of those manuscripts. And all some of them just jump out and they are exceptional books, and I am just absolutely thrilled to have published them, and they change my thinking and change I hope other people's thinking too. Other books, they might be, we may have several books by financial advisors, for example, which all have their own individual take on them. But, and I don't want to make this sound as if I'm not impressed by the work that financial advisors do or the books that they write, but they may not have such original and different approaches, perhaps, or new ideas. Some of them do. I mean, I would say, some of them do have very different approaches, but it's I'm not I'm not going to say this is the way that I can. I mean, I think it's very much for me an intuitive thing, and what is really the things that spring out to me are the ones, it's very personal, I suppose, really the books that I really love and sort of have a real feel really honored to be publishing and knowing those authors. It's not something I can predict or something I would want to put in a box. It kind of comes out of the blue very often.
Yeah,
And
I
that
think it's really great. It's not too dissimilar to us. I mean, obviously we're not publishing anything, but the honor we had to talk to certain book authors and their ideas is sort of that, where you don't really know, and sometimes you pick up a niche book and you just love it, and they're great, and some should be more popular and they're not, and others are less and they do. So I think therefore, yeah, I mean, it's books are great, and it's a beautiful area to stick around in and keep reading and whatnot. So, without further much ado, therefore, I say, well, Lucy, thank you so much for all those insights and for spending time with us. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been really enjoyable to talk to you, and hopefully we'll chat again.
You've been listening to The Wicked Podcast with co-host Marcus Kirsch and me, Troy Norcross.
Please subscribe on Podomatic, iTunes, or Spotify. You can find all relevant links in the show notes. Please tell us your thoughts in the comment section and let us know about any books for future episodes.
You can also get in touch with us directly on Twitter on @WickedandBeyond or @Troy_Norcross. Also, learn more about the Wicked Company book and the Wicked Company project at wickedcompany.com.